All right, welcome back. I love these hats because they never quite look centered. They don't quite look right, and yet it's just absolutely gorgeous. So wearing Philly because Philadelphia. Finally, the dam bursts. Somebody signed something. Holy crap. So while we're talking about the NHL returning, one thing that's going to tell us, hey, we're back in business, is the Philadelphia Flyers sitting down and working out an extension for Philippe Myers. 3 years. Cap hit $2.55 million. That's reasonable, and it feels nice to be talking about a signing, right? So even though it's a restricted free agent, I will take that. I will take that. I'll throw that in my pocket and say, all right, so this means we're back in business. There's no reason for GMs to sit down and talk to players right now if they thought we weren't going to have a season. So there you go. Speaking of which, as they continue to negotiate, they want to have an agreement they can take to both the Board of Governors and to the NHLPA executive by the end of this week. So they want to get this done. Today's Tuesday. They want to have it up to the Board of Governors, all signed off on by the end of the week. And there are some owners who are not happy. The question becomes how many? And I don't think that those owners are going to stand in the way of a season taking place. Basically, they took all the finances and said, we'll kick that down the road. We'll talk about it next year. And so the sooner you get back to work, the sooner you get a season going, the more games you're able to play, which could mean expanded playoffs. We'll see. It could be almost anything, right? The sooner you start to recoup some of that money so that players lose less, owners lose less. And again, it's a matter of finding that sweet spot if you can. And so we're looking at the possibility of the roster being expanded from 23 players to 26. Now, how that's going to work with the salary cap, because, of course, it's a 23-man roster that counts towards the cap if you expand it to 26, right? So, do all 26 count towards that $81.5 million? Do you bump the $81.5 million up, or do you just go, forget it, it's this year, forget it, just forget it. Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about the cap, guys. Just forget about it. Don't worry about it. Just whatever. They're not making that money anyways, so just forget it. We'll see, right? Expanding the roster makes a lot of sense. I know during the playoffs that when a player got hurt, seeing somebody else allowed to take their place on the roster rather than playing short of defenseman or short of forward, I loved that. I want that to continue. I want that to be a thing for good in the NHL. I want it to be so that if a player gets hurt during the game, you can dress another player. Maybe make it so you can do it twice in any given game, but that has to be through injury. It can't be you're just, bringing a guy out, bringing somebody in relief. And we'll see. I think it works, and I think it's something that's a good idea. There could be some good ideas that accidentally get discovered in the midst of all this. So, expanding the rosters makes a lot of sense because of border restrictions as well, and depending on where AHL teams are and everything, right? That's all to be decided too. I would think the AHL teams for the Canadian teams will be in Canadian cities to start the year. So I would be very surprised if Vancouver doesn't figure out a way to have their farm team in Abbotsford just for this year and then move forward back to Utica from there. Team Canada. Remember Team Canada had to all go into quarantine? It's done. So they get back to their camp. And now it's a matter of, so now that they're behind the other teams, how quickly do they get caught up? And what are we going to see? And we'll see how that works because it's still a decent enough training camp. And we're talking about NHL players coming back with a 10-day training camp, no exhibition games, and going back to work on the ice. So we'll see if Team Canada's hurt by not being able to practice together and all of that. Romanov, if you're a fan of the Habs, you may be excited to find out that Romanov's in town. He has started his quarantine, and he's getting set to jump onto the ice in 14 days. So the players who are coming into Canada, this is good. That most of the names I've seen are European. There's still some American players that are in the States, but a lot of players are coming in, and this is because they're like, all right, so we're getting ready to play in January. We're going to go through the quarantine process, and then we'll be good to go. So entering now, that would mean that 14 days from now is the 22nd. And then he's out of quarantine. He's allowed to go to practice, to which he'll probably hear, oh, we're shutting down for Christmas. You can come back in a few days, though. I also want to throw out there, keep an eye on UFAs starting now. So if you've been waiting, going, where's Hoffman going to sign? Now is where we start to have real discussions. Now is also where we start to see how the Barzal situation in New York is going to work itself out. They have to stay under the cap. All these teams have to be under the cap, but they have to be able to sign players. And we'll see how much money Barzal gets, and whether or not Boychuk retiring gives them enough money to keep Barzal, and what else happens for the Islanders. And of course, Tampa. Tampa has a couple of big name players who they still have to sign, and they don't have any cap space. So these GMs should be on the phone and start working today. Today should be when they start working, and I should be reporting to all you fine people on trades and signings and that kind of thing over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the return of the NHL. And I think it's a matter of, they know that there's all kinds of local restrictions they're going to have to deal with. There's regional restrictions. The sooner you can decide on a framework for the season, the sooner you can start talking to local officials and figure out how to make this work. So they got to get it done now. I also want to throw in, because Christmas is a little over 2 weeks away, here's my plug for the WCK Foundation.ca website, West Coast Kids Foundation. Again, if you use this, you can use the hashtag THGgives when you leave a note there for when you for if you're able to donate. But I really haven't worried about it. I really haven't, and I know this has happened with promo codes too, where Yvonne will say, when you promoted this object or item or product, did you tell them to use your code? And I'm like, well, no, this other code works too. And she's like, well, it's the same discount, but you get recognized if they use that other code. And I'm like, they still got the discount. So I don't really care if there's any attachment with me at all. I know that they've seen an uptick in donations, and again, this is for families of kids who are dealing with cancer treatment, coming out of cancer treatment, and it gives to the entire families, and so it's a great cause. And this is right around where, you know, things get kind of you know, down to the wire for that as well, because we are just a couple weeks out from Christmas. So if you're able to give, awesome. If you already have, thank you very much. And it does feel good to give to charity. And again, and I mentioned this in a previous video too, if you're able to adopt a family and help them out at this time of year, I would think 2020 has been a time of year for a lot of families to have a hard time. We adopted two ourselves, where we're buying Christmas presents for them, for their kids and everything. And that way they can make sure that they and their kids have good Christmases, and they don't feel like they're financially put upon along the way. So there you go. Also want to say, for people looking for pro hockey, and I know there's NCAA going on, I know there's hockey going on in Europe, but if you want to watch and catch up on stuff going on the North American side of things, the ECHL has their weekend schedule starting on Friday. There's 5 games Friday and there's 5 games Saturday. Then it looks like there's 6 games the following Friday. So I can definitely discuss what happens in these games when they're done. These teams have started to release players. When you're releasing players from your training camps, it means you're getting close. And of course, NHL teams are going to be figuring out how to make this work. Where there's 15 teams playing in the ECHL, you have 31 teams in the NHL. But with expanded rosters and with discussions of how the AHL is going to work, I think we're going to see large taxi squads. I think it's going to be a completely different setup this year. Again, just for this season. But it's going to be fun to follow, fun to watch. And hey, finally, there's some positives coming out of what's been a very, very, very long off season if you're a fan of one of the 7 teams that haven't played since March. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, I will link to their website in the description for this video, as I always do when I talk about it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.